And good day, friends. Thanks for joining us here on the Western Ag Network's Fencelines and Headlines. If you're streaming on YouTube, Twitter, X, whatever it's called nowadays, Facebook Live, or joining us on the audio portion located on the Lancaster Ag podcast platforms, we appreciate you being here with us today. We're going to talk about a few of the top headlines impacting farmers and ranchers across Western Ag Network country. And we have a special guest that will be joining us a little bit later. Our network's Russell Nimitz. He's on assignment, aka he's kicked his feet up and he's relaxing on vacation this weekend. So it's going to be me and a friend of ours that is an agricultural broadcaster as well. Jason Laird with KMON Radio will be joining us here in a little bit. And you also may know Jason as a meteorologist. So we are going to have him join us and talk about some of our ag headlines, but also give a quick forecast on what producers can expect here in the short term. Some of those headlines we're going to talk about here today is a move by the Montana Attorney General, Austin Knudsen, in terms of asking for a stay in terms of the BLM's decision on bison grazing in Phillips County. We're also going to talk about that issue that just won't go away, it seems, that being the waters of the U.S. rule. The Biden administration has updated that rule, and it came out this past week. And also for all of you farmers and tractor enthusiasts out there, we're going to have an update on that brand new Big Bud tractor. It made its second official debut at the Farm Progress Show. And as we mentioned, Jason Laird will join us, and we're going to have a quick forecast with him here later in the report. But before we get to that, as we mentioned, Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen has called on Federal Appeals Board officials to overturn a Bureau of Land Management final decision that rubber stamped a controversial and locally opposed change of use permit to allow bison grazing on several allotments in Phillips County, Montana. Earlier this week, our network's Russell Nimitz caught up with Attorney General Knudsen on what this appeal means.
Well, wild bison are certainly a sore subject of sorts with Montana ranchers, especially in Phillips County. And rightfully so, and that's why groups like the Montana Stock Growers, Montana Public Lands Council, Montana Farm Bureau, and even the state of Montana itself have made wild bison management such a top priority. With us now is Montana Attorney General Austin Knudsen. And Austin, give us the latest on this very important issue to Montana's ranching industry, more specifically APR's wild bison in Phillips County and the federal government.
Yeah, so the latest is we are still in front of a federal appeals judge within the BLM. We have to go through their administrative appeals process before we can get into federal court. I think we probably end up there anyway, but this is a step we have to take. But look, we're in front of an appeals judge right now. We just this week, the state of Montana, my office, filed a motion for summary judgment. What we're asking for is for a final determination from this judge. We don't need this to go any further. Judge, you have enough information, you can rule on this now. We believe that the BLM is pretty flagrantly violating the Taylor Grazing Act. State or federal law is very clear. Bison are not livestock. That federal land, the priority use is livestock grazing, and livestock, as you know, is a defined term. Buffalo, bison doesn't appear in federal code anywhere. So what's happened here is BLM has stepped in and they've kind of shoehorned in this term indigenous livestock. It's a nonsense term, doesn't exist anywhere in federal code. They created it out of thin air, and that's really the basis for our action here. So that's where we are. We're hopeful we get a good ruling.
How frustrating is it for those in Montana's livestock industry, including you? I mean, your family's involved with the livestock industry here in Big Sky Country, that we're even having to talk about this issue after the BLM opened this issue up for public comment. We had some virtual meetings. You and the governor had an in-person meeting or two. Overwhelmingly heard opposition from Montana's livestock industry, and here we are still talking about this.
Well, I mean, this is what happens when you've got Deb Haaland, who is the head of Interior, and you've got Tracy Stone Manning, who is a radical liberal from right here in Montana, who is in charge of the Federal Bureau of Land Management. This is what happens when you get radical leftists like this in these positions of power. They start trying to pass regulations and do things that aren't even in federal code. It's extremely frustrating. The quote unquote, public comment session that BLM had, it was virtual. They did it in the middle of summertime and on a weekday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when they knew all the farmers and ranchers in Phillips County were out in the hayfields. That was intentional. So what did my office do? We went and we did an in-person, actual public listening session. I couldn't believe it, Russell. It was a Thursday afternoon, Wednesday or Thursday. I bet we had 400 people show up in the auditorium in Malta. I was amazed. I thought there'd at least be somebody who was in favor of this BLM move. 100% of the people who attended, the locals who attended, were opposed to this action. It's incredibly frustrating to see this coming out of Washington, D.C., and them just trying to shove it down our throats here in Montana.
Austin, describe too, while we're doing this interview, for folks outside of Montana, how dangerous of a precedent this could set for other states who could be facing similar issues like this in the future.
It's extremely dangerous. This should be concerning to attorneys general, governors, legislators across the country. If a federal agency can step in and change the use of federal land, change federal law with just the stroke of a pen, a regulation change at the agency level, that's pretty staggering. When you talk about national parks, you can talk about federal lands, grazing lands, but I mean this could go further. We could really open Pandora's box here if this is allowed to stand. I don't think we're in danger of that. I really don't. The U.S. Supreme Court has been very clear in the last couple of years. It does not look kindly on agencies taking this kind of sweeping, law-changing actions at the agency level. We've got a number of cases that are very clear on that. So I think if we end up having to go to the U.S. Supreme Court, I think BLM is going to get slapped down pretty hard here.
Hey, lastly, as we wait for a decision regarding your last filing and just wait for more on this big issue, I mean, what can farmers and ranchers do, not just in Phillips County, not just here in Montana, but everywhere where this issue matters to them, be doing?
Well, I mean, stay in touch with your federal delegation, I would say, first and foremost. Secondly, vote. Pay attention to how you're voting and who you're voting for. I mean, you got to realize that, I mean, these kind of policies come from, they come from the halls of Congress and from some members of our federal delegation that maybe are pushing some of the stuff behind the scenes. So your vote does matter, but I would say, I mean, stay involved. Make sure the governor's office still hears from you. Make sure my office is still hearing from you. Contact Senator Daines. Contact Senator Tester and let him know what we think about this, because he needs to hear it the most. If anyone's got the Biden administration's ear, it's John Tester.
Again, for more information on this story and all of the headlines that have gone along with this very delicate story that impacts so many landowners, farmers, and ranchers in central and north central Montana, make sure and check us out online at westernagnetwork.com. Well, hey, as I mentioned, Russell Nimitz is on vacation, but we are joined today by one of our friends in the broadcast industry. Mr. Jason Laird joins us. Of course, he is the new voice of KMON Radio 560, that is. Jason, thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on the show. It's a pleasure.
Well, we truly appreciate you teaming up with us here today. We do want to give a shout out to KMON Radio. They are a flagship station for the Western Ag Network, and Jason's going to chime in a little bit with us here today. And as I mentioned, give us a brief weather forecast as well at the end of our show. But Jason, stand by. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and friends that are watching this stream, stay with us. We'll be back right after these words.
Ready for a real PRF partner?
He was willing to track us for a year and provide that data back to us for a year. That's a guy making a pretty big investment.
At Ag Risk Advisors, this isn't our first rodeo. We are one of the most experienced in pasture rangeland forage. Honesty, commitment, trust. Many companies use these words. At Ag Risk Advisors, we earn them.
Again, a big shout out to our friends at Ag Risk Advisors for their support of Fence Lines and Headlines here today. And for more information, visit agriskadvisors.com. Well, as I mentioned, we have a guest host here with us here today, Mr. Jason Laird, the host of the morning show on 560 KMON. That's my hometown station. I get to listen to him every morning, along with listening to myself as well.
I don't know if "get to" is the right answer there, Lane, but yeah, we'll have it on in the background, right?
I get to listen to you, and I have the privilege of listening to Baker Bob.
Yes, yeah.
Your number two in command. So let's talk about that a little bit. With a little bit of your career here, Jason. Before maybe we talk, we'll talk about your role at KMON, but you're no stranger to viewers and listeners across Montana and the West. In fact, our viewers in Colorado maybe used to be able to tune into your TV reports down in Colorado, but. How did you get your start in broadcasting?
Oh my gosh. I kind of stumbled into it. So fresh out of high school, I literally started knocking on doors. I had this idea. I was like, gosh, I love radio. I love listening to radio. So I just started knocking on doors, and finally somebody was dumb enough to hire me and give me basically an internship getting the Real DJ's coffee, running the board for sports programs, that sort of thing. And that's kind of how I got my feet wet. And once I got into the broadcast industry, I was like, I wanted to elevate my career and take it to the next level. And so I was like, well, logically, television is kind of the next stop, right? So went from radio into television. When I first started in TV, it was kind of the same thing, knocking on doors until somebody was dumb enough to hire me. And that happened to be Q2 in Billings. When I first started at the TV station, I didn't really know where my fit was going to be. I knew at some point I wanted to work on-camera work. Maybe that's reporting, maybe it's anchoring, maybe it's weather. I had no idea. But I knew I kind of wanted to get some camera time and get in front of the camera at some point. And really what stumbled across was weather. I came out of radio, so ad-libbing and talking to myself in a padded room was totally justifiable. So it just so happened that the weekend weather gal was leaving, and there was an opening to try weather. So I took this old intro to meteorology book, and I read the thing cover to cover and started studying. I was like, gosh, this is actually pretty interesting. I really, really enjoy weather. So that's when I started going to school for it. Went to Mississippi State, got my broadcast meteorology certificate, and kind of the rest is history. And yeah, as you mentioned, Lane, went from Billings down to Colorado, worked in Colorado Springs for a couple of years, both in television and radio. Got out of the business for a while, stayed in it kind of part-time, just doing some stuff on the side, but got out of it for a while. Opportunity opened up to come back to Montana in Great Falls, and that's what brought me back here doing TV weather for a while, got out of television, and now, as you mentioned, back in radio for Heritage Station here in Great Falls, which I'm super excited to be a part of. And, I was just looking up the dates here the other day, and 75 years old. Can you believe that, Lane? Like literally wow. KMON, yeah, it's actually a little bit older than that, but we officially got KMON as call letters in February of 1948. So over 75 years, KMON has been on the airwaves, broadcasting all throughout north central Montana. So it's really humbling and really cool to be part of a legacy ag radio station like that.
And Jason, we've talked a lot about, especially in radio and especially the farm broadcasting realm, just the significance of AM radio stations.
You bet.
That's been a top headline for mainstream media as well.
Right.
But out in central Montana, and first off, how many counties does
oh my gosh.
KMON? Is it over 30 or 38?
I've got somewhere in there. Yeah, I've got the coverage map pulled up here because I knew I was going to have a question like that. And to put in perspective, like our signal, so we're based out of Great Falls, obviously, but our signal goes well past Helena, south, all the way over to Roundup, basically straight up to Glasgow, clear up into Canada, over to just about Kalispell. So basically right along the Rocky Mountains there, all the way south, toward Fairfield, and then kind of jogs back over to Great Falls. So I'm not even sure the total number of counties just in Montana, but it's basically almost all of north central Montana. And you really hit the nail on the head. I mean, you go out to a lot of these places. I mean, our family farms up there in Liberty County. There's no cell service up in a lot of these parts. There's no other way to get your information. So, when talking about having a source like ag radio and AM radio, it may seem old, it may seem antiquated, but there's really no other source of communication out there. There's no internet. There's no cell phone signal. So, AM radio is kind of it. And that's what's so cool about this is not only to be on a legacy station, but also a station that people rely on for news, weather, sports, ag information. And, we try to throw a little entertainment in there too. So.
Well, and I should point out, and this is not just a commercial for the radio station, but right. I listen to all platforms. I listen to KMON on the AM, and then I'll turn on Sirius XM as well,
right,
and go back and forth. But you guys got a new translator, didn't you? And honestly,
we did.
It sounds like an FM station.
Yes, we did get a brand spanking new transmitter. We've had a couple of trouble with it. That last storm that came through, it's not the actual transmitter, but we did have another little part break. So what people don't understand a lot of times is AM radio switches at night. So during the day, we have this huge signal, and then at night, it powers down. And to nerd out a little bit about meteorology and atmospheric conditions, we won't go down the rabbit hole, but atmospheric conditions change at night. So it allows for an AM signal to travel further. So the FCC, depending on your license, makes you powered down. So during the day, we have one antenna. At night, we actually have two directional antennas that point that signal in different directions, basically one going north, one going south. And the last little storm system that we had through, I don't know if it took a lightning strike. I don't know the exact part that broke, but we've had a little bit of trouble getting that signal south. But yes, you did hit the nail on the head. We got a brand new transmitter. People don't understand those things are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So it's really cool to have one. We've kind of been joking that the old one was literally held together with, duct tape and baling twine. That's not far from the truth. So yes, we did get a new transmitter, sounding good, and it's only going to get better as we continue to tune it and it breaks in. It's only going to get better and have a better signal.
Jason, again, 75 years with the call letters KMON, and there's been some pretty legendary broadcasters on KMON. And, I think of Grassroots Gold, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dave Wilson, you bet.
With Dave Wilson and whatnot. What does that mean to you, though? I mean, because so many people, like I pointed out, these new auto manufacturers, they want to push AM radio out of these vehicles and whatnot, but it truly is a lifeline for so many people, but it's a safety precaution as well.
Right.
But, 75 years of, being a voice for Central Montana, North Central Montana. What does that mean to you to come into this role and kind of help lead that legacy and keep agriculture on people's minds, even if they live in Great Falls or Lewistown and they have an office job, but maybe they grew up on a farmer ranch, or maybe they've never been on a farmer ranch. Maybe it's somebody at Maelstrom that just wants to know, what goes on in agriculture in the state of Montana in particular. What does that legacy mean to you?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's just incredibly humbling. I mean, even just hearing you talk about it, it sounds corny, but I get shivers just thinking about it. And honestly, I mean, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to fill the shoes of the legacy individuals that have been at that station. I mean, as you mentioned, Dave Wilson, Skip Walters, Sarge. There's been huge names on KMON over the years that have really carried it on. So, I mean, be able to have this opportunity to be on such a legacy station, carry on that legacy it's incredibly humbling. It's exciting, it's fun, it's humbling. It's being part of something that is most definitely bigger than yourself. And I think that's what's so cool about it. I mean, I go back to, my family and families that have been in Montana for 100 plus years, right? These legacy farm and ranch families. And to think that this radio station has been part of their lives for decades is absolutely incredible. And just being part of carrying that into the next generation is so important to us. And that's something we take very, very seriously at the radio station. There's been some changes we've made since I've taken over that morning show to really make sure that everything we do, agriculture is the core of that station, right? Yes, we're going to have politicians, and yes, we're going to have interviews. Yes, we're going to have various content, but I really want to make sure that no matter what we do, the farmer and the rancher out there is going to get value in what we do and see value in what we do, and really make sure that we're providing the information they need to, live the best life they possibly can in agriculture. So that's something we take very seriously, and I want to make sure that no matter what we do, agriculture is at the core of that radio station.
Well, I know our viewers and listeners, if this is their hometown station or regional station, they appreciate that. And, for all the other states that Western Ag Network covers, we know that all those local affiliates that we have really are the backbone of our communities that keep the information flowing and really support all these communities and all of the events that they have. So, a tip of the hat to you, Jason, and the crew
Thank
there
you.
at KMON, and congrats again. And we try to share all that information that impacts all farmers and ranchers, regionally, state specific, and I know you really help focus that on the local and county level type of things that's going
Yes.
on. But one of those issues that everybody has talked about for so many years is the waters of the U.S. And Jason, you probably heard this on our reports at least 4 or 5 times this week, but uh, just this week, the Biden administration announced that new revised waters of the U.S. rule. Farmers and ranchers and landowners have been frustrated with this, and they're still frustrated, they say, with the Biden administration's latest rule. The administration, of course, was forced to update the controversial Biden WOTUS rule because the U.S. Supreme Court altered how the EPA determines what water is jurisdictional under the Clean Water Act. Back in May, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled the significant nexus test was unlawful, among other items. And earlier this week, we caught up with Wyoming Farm Bureau President Todd Fornstrom, who says farmers and ranchers are still not pleased with the changes.
They obviously are in a hurry to get some federal control over of waters that are already regulated by local government, whether it be county or state. They just want to get their hands on control. I don't see it any other way. They did this rule today without any further comment, which is a little bit of a backdoor. And we've said all along, the water that's not regulated by the EPA is already regulated by the state of Wyoming, state of Nebraska, state of California. And we all have to come up to a minimum standard before the EPA goes along with our regulations. So I don't quite understand why they think they have to be the one in charge.
The EPA removed the term significant nexus in the WOTUS rule in its latest revision after the Supreme Court in May declared unconstitutional the jurisdictional test that has been the subject of intense opposition and litigation for nearly a decade.
And what they have done with the rule, from what we can tell so far, is they've addressed some of the things, the main the nexus of all the waters that are connected to navigable waters. They've thrown that out of their reg, and that's really all they've changed. So they really haven't affected any of the rest of their rule that was thrown out altogether.
And while farmers and ranchers remain frustrated over these changes, President Biden's Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, this week said he believes that the EPA and the Army Corps are just following the directive set out by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Well, let's be fair to the EPA on the WOTUS rule. Essentially, they made an effort. The court gave them instructions, and they recently come out and complied with the court's instructions. So it's now providing farmers with the predictability and stability, and responded to some of the concerns that were most top of mind by farmers and the Farm Bureau, for example. That's been handled by the court, and a revised rule that I think they announced today.
Again, Jason, a very sensitive topic for so many farmers and ranchers out in the countryside. And I just think this is probably going to continue to be a court battle over the next few weeks. But important information for all of our audience members out there.
Oh, incredibly important information. I mean, and that's what is so valuable about having, you as the Western Ag Network on KMON as well, is to be able to, communicate that the news and the hard news details on that. So no, I totally agree. It's going to be a long-standing issue, I think. And, water is everything with agriculture, not only for production, but also transportation.
And that is true. And as we always say, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And actually, that's a little bit of a preview. This next week, Russell Nimitz and Paul Humphrey and I, we're going to be out in Pendleton, Oregon. We're going to be letting our buck, as it says on the Pendleton whiskey bottles, but we're going to be attending the Public Lands Council annual meeting. So, friends, if you're tuned in right now, we'll have more coverage throughout next week and of course, on our fence lines and headlines. But again, Jason Laird is joining us here today. He will be sharing a quick weather update in our final half of today's program. But Jason, we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to talk about tractors before we talk about your weather. Are you okay talking about tractors?
100%, especially the scale of tractors that we're going to be talking about.
Oh, yeah. We're not talking about toy tractors, but we could.
Well, there's some pretty cool ones out there too, yeah.
Well, friends, stick with us. We're going to be back with Jason Laird, and we're going to talk about something big. That's a tractor named Bud. We'll be back right after these words.
When it comes to the beef business, there's no room for gray area. The decisions being made in Washington affect the future of the beef industry, the livelihood of your fellow farmers and ranchers. Your National Cattlemen's Beef Association knows there's what benefits cattlemen and there's what doesn't. Visit ncba.org to learn more.
As we return back to our Fence Lines and Headlines program here today, if you haven't done so yet, make sure and subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, the Western Ag Network YouTube channel. Follow us, like us on Facebook, and also there on Twitter, X, whatever it's called. Jason, what do you call it? Do you call it X, or do you
I call it a train wreck. That's what I call it. I don't even know what it is anymore. It's like trying to keep up with all the social headlines it's a full-time job in itself.
Well, that's like Threads or whatever, if you were on Instagram or Facebook, you could just set up an account and made it seem like you had all these followers.
Right.
But I mean, I've posted 3 total things on Threads, and we have a Western Ag Network Threads just because you need to be in that area. But I have no interaction from my audience. But I just always find that very interesting to see what's new. And we don't even do TikTok because, of course, TikTok it's illegal still.
I know.
Can you use it in Montana? I know you guys have talked about that. I never had it before it became illegal in Montana to use. So
yeah, no, same here. I never had it. I've never downloaded. I'm kind of curious because we were talking about I live down in Colorado, and I've never strategically changed my area code back to Montana. So I'm curious if I could get away with it, if I could still have TikTok because I have an out-of-state area code, but I don't know if that would work or not.
I always ignored your numbers before I saved your number in my phone.
Yeah, I figured as much. Yeah,
it's out of state. No,
right. Took me at least 3 phone calls to get a hold of you. So
yeah. We Jason and I just met here this week.
Never met him before in my life. Yeah.
But Jason, we're not talking about toy tractors here today, even though many of our viewers maybe had one of these tractors in a smaller scale back in the day. Big Bud. That's just such a icon of Montana. And earlier this year, we did report that the return of the king is coming. And of course, that being the Big Bud tractor. And this is something that we've talked about quite some time. We covered the Construction Expo in Las Vegas earlier this year, where the model of the new Big Bud was unveiled. And folks at the recent Farm Progress show got to see the new model of the Big Bud that's going to be manufactured right on Montana's High Line in Havre, Montana. Our friend Mr. Chad Colby was on hand for this year's Farm Progress show, and he shares more from one of the fan favorites, of course, that being the Big Bud there in Decatur, Illinois.
This past week in Decatur, Illinois, the site of the 2023 Farm Progress Show, there was a lot of great new technology on display. Some for the very first time. Case IH had their new Steiger. John Deere had some new balers. I could go on and on and on about all this great new equipment. But one attraction got a lot of looks, and that was, for the first time in 40 years, as most of you have already heard, Big Bud is going back into production. At the Titan International booth, the makers of the Goodyear farm tire, they had one of these pre-production models on display. And every time I went by this booth, there were constantly people looking at this tractor, taking pictures. Is it because it's an iconic tractor? Certainly to some degree, yes, but to the bigger point, This tractor is for sale now. You can buy it. They are already taking orders and have plenty of orders for next year. In fact, they're doubling production in 25. As you walked around this tractor, you could tell it was a pre-production model. If you don't know a lot about it, it draws on its heritage. This is a tractor with a big hydraulic tilt hood and cab. You can get right at it. This has a Caterpillar driveline, extremely heavy duty and overbuilt. It's designed for one particular job, and that is to last a long time, just like Big Buds have done since they began a long, long time ago. They took a 40-year break, but a lot of those tractors are still in the field, as we all know. At this farm show, it's a little unique because there's nothing like it in the world, where they do have outdoor demonstrations. And you can bet at the 2024 Farm Progress Show, which will be in Boone, Iowa, by the way, well, hopefully we'll get a chance to see this tractor in the field. We know there's customers that are going to take delivery of this tractor early next year. I can tell you this, the field demos at the Farm Progress Show are outstanding. And we all kind of can't wait until we see this new Big Bud in the field soon, because we know it's going to happen. You can find out more about Big Bud and get all your questions answered at bigequipment.com. I'm Chad Colby for the Western Ag Network.
Again, you can get those orders in. Just contact Big Equipment Sales there in Havre. And Jason, I always almost wreck or give myself whiplash when I see a Big Bud along the road or farming or whatnot, because growing up, it was just that lore that they don't make these anymore. And
Right.
they're the best tractors ever. And did your family ever own a Big Bud up there in Chester?
Not to my knowledge, no. I was trying to think about that when you mentioned it. Obviously, there's a ton of them on the High Line, and I've done enough, ag stories over the years with folks that have Big Bud, but I don't know that any of the Lairds had Big Buds up there. But
Yet.
yeah, now that they're coming back, you never know, right? But no, there's something impressive about those things. It just, yeah, I'm in the same boat. Every time you drive by and you see one, it's just like, or when you're cruising up by Big Equipment on the way to Havre there, you do one of the, whiplash deals. So I totally understand.
Well, and obviously this is newer equipment, newer technology that's going into the construction and build of these new Big Buds. But one of the big talking points that owner of Big Equipment Sales, Ron Harmon, really emphasizes that producers can work on these tractors. So much of the time we've covered quite a bit about efforts to have a right to repair legislation.
Right.
That failed in Montana, passed in Colorado's legislature this year. It's just a big talking point, especially when you're broke down. And there's pros and cons to both arguments, but just knowing that if you are broke down, you might be able to work on it yourself. So I'm excited. I haven't seen the new model in person. I've just been in awe watching these videos and watching all these people react. And again, this is the model. They're going to be rolling those out here very soon. But hopefully, maybe Russell Nimitz and I can both sit on the buddy seat on one of these new ones. Both of us are. I'll sit on his lap, or he can sit on my lap.
There you go.
And take a spin in that. But it truly not. And we're both Montana boys, so we get excited when we see it. But so many tractor enthusiasts are excited to see. I kind of stole that from. We've been watching a lot of Lord of the Rings here lately, The Return of the King, because I truly think this is just one of those. Outstanding tractors that it lives in mythology almost.
It really does. Yeah. I mean, it's got Montana written all over it, obviously, and that's what I think that's what like settles in with me more than anything, is the fact that, it's basically a Montana native as far as I'm concerned.
Yep. Well, again, it's going to be great to see these new Big Buds roll off the line and, getting ready for planting and working those fields. It's going to be, again, pretty cool to see these brand new ones out off the line. But, Jason, a few months ago, you and I caught up and we were really talking about that, the forecast for the year and whatnot. And things have been pretty good for producers so far this year. And, I will say the smoke has kind of went away. I was not a fan of the wind that we had the last few days.
Yeah, no doubt, right?
But, I guess you are a meteorologist as well. And so that really goes hand in hand for you being able to communicate with the farmers and ranchers when you're talking on KMON. I think they can really appreciate that insight. For me, I look at the temperature gauge and say, oh, it's cold, it's windy out.
Right.
we got grasshoppers, whatnot. But I guess if you're up for it, what are
Yeah.
we looking like
All right.
when we're looking at the short-term weather forecast?
Well, I always equate weather forecasting to being like a stockbroker, Lane. I'm usually the last one to know what it's going to do. And I will say I'm a little bit out of practice. Obviously, we take a really heavy weather focus on the KMON morning show. I try to elaborate on the forecast a little bit, not just give you, your highs and your lows and it's going to be windy, it's going to be this, that, or the other. I really try to give you a little bit more substance and let you know how it's going. How are we sitting on time, Lane, first of all? Do we need to...
We're fine.
We good? Okay, I wasn't sure if I needed to set a...
church yet. No, we're
Perfect.
good.
Okay, well, that's good. Probably get hit with a lightning bolt if he came in. So, all right. So let me see if I can't share my screen here real quick. Oh boy, gives me a whole bunch of them here. Let's do entire screen. I think that would be the way to go. All right. Let me know if that comes up okay for you.
I just got to add you in.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right. There we go. Okay, so what we're going to start with here is just kind of over the next couple of days as we head through, Labor Day and first part of next week and whatnot. Just kind of give you an idea of how things are shaping. And really, anytime you're forecasting the weather, there's a lot going on this map. So don't get too worried about it. We're going to kind of break it down. So I think my mouse shows up okay there, it looks like. So kind of keep your eye on this area where my mouse is here. What we've got going on is a pretty decent little chunk of low pressure off the Pacific coast. And what it's doing is it's causing a bit of a dip in the jet stream, some colder air pocketed in there, and it's also hooking onto some moisture. So again, we're sitting today, later this afternoon into the evening. And as I take this out, you're going to notice here, pretty dry through the weekend. We're sitting into Saturday. Now we're into Sunday. Sunday night into Monday. This is why I always joke and say Mother Nature has one heck of a sense of humor, because of course we're all off work, so what are we going to be out doing, trying to have a little bit of fun, and boom, there comes that next little system. So you really just notice that area of low pressure right there moves inland, pretty aggressive little area of low pressure, and it's just going to pull some moisture up. I don't think we're going to have a real super soak or anything like that. I think these models might be a little bit over-exaggerated in terms of how much we're going to get, but look at that, there's even a little snow in there over the mountains. So wouldn't be out of the question to see a little bit of snow in the mountains, but really going to probably see a little bit of rain move in. Again, that is going to be Sunday night into Monday, right on track with Labor Day, and then that system's going to move out pretty darn quickly and open things up. But again, I'm a little bit out of practice in terms of, weather forecasting long-term. I'm more of a day-to-day they call it operational meteorology. I'm by no means a climatologist, but I know enough to be somewhat dangerous in terms of long-term forecasting. So if you've heard me talk with Lane before, or you've seen any of my presentations, we really like to focus in on sea surface temperatures. So again, going back over to the graphics here, in terms of sea surface temperatures right now, earlier this year, into the North Pacific, we had a pocket of colder air. That's called this area right here is called the PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And that colder water is what helped keep us wet and cool for the first half of the summer. And as soon as that cold water started to dissipate, that's when we got really, really hot. Now, where I was wrong this summer was I thought that was going to dissipate a lot quicker. We transitioned from La Nina into El Nino very, very quickly, but we kind of held on to that colder water off of the North Pacific. So that's what kept us cooler, kept the rain coming in, which I don't think anybody's complaining about. I mean, yeah, we might see a little bit lower protein levels because we didn't have that heat spike, right before harvest, but I think everybody really appreciated the rain. But you'll notice right here off of the California coast here, this little pocket of water, what that's been doing for us is feeding a little bit of moisture into the California region and what they call like a monsoonal flow. So that's where we've seen some of the recent moisture coming through Montana. You get that area of low pressure off the Pacific, and it's been helping draw a little bit of that monsoonal flow off of the California coast. So that's going to be what's feeding our weather here over the next couple of days. You'll also notice we mentioned the La Nina versus the El Nino. We are full-blown El Nino now. I always like to say when we're talking weather forecasting long-term, transition periods are the best for weather, because what happens is you don't have any real major dictators of your weather forecast, right? So if you're heavy La Nina, certain things are going to happen. If you're heavy El Nino, certain things are going to happen. But those transition periods are your best years because the atmosphere is just free flowing, right? Nothing's stopping it. And that, again, is what we saw for a good chunk of our summer until we started to hit El Nino really, really hard. That's when we got hot and dry really, really quickly. So again, as we go back to the graphics here, over the next couple of months, we'll call it, really the take-home message is going to be El Nino is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. So as we look, I know this is a little bit dinky. I wonder if I can blow it up. There we go. Okay. So this first one we're looking at right here, this is just a real basic El Nino, La Nina forecast over the next couple of months. So if you look down here, it looks kind of funky here, but it's just basically July, August, September, October, September, October, November. And this forecast that you're looking at here is a combination of forecast models and what actual human forecasters think it's going to do. And I always like to show both because sometimes they're completely different. Sometimes the models are saying one thing and actual humans are saying a complete different thing. But as you notice, El Nino pretty much here to stay as we head through the next couple of months. This one right here is just the strictly model-based forecast, okay? The IRI. So in other words, there's not a lot of difference between the two of them. You'll notice pretty much hanging on to El Nino at least into the first part of next year. I don't know that it's going to fade that particularly quickly. Some of these forecast models, again, fading it spring of next year. I don't know if that's actually going to be the thing. And then we always like to show you this, not to really go down the bandwagon too much of how things trend, but I always just like to show folks everything is relative. Everything is trending, right? So we've been in a La Nina the last couple of years. It was a little bit rare for us to have that triple dip, that double to triple dip, but here we are spiking right back into El Nino. Okay, so to kind of give you a little bit of answers as to what I'm talking about here, what El Nino means for our winter months. Again, I'm not going to really give you a definitive forecast. I'm going to give you a little bit what I'm looking at and what is going to play into our winter weather forecast. So if you just, keep it super, super basic, a neutral pattern, in other words, if we're not in El Nino or La Nina, we're just neutral pattern, those are going to be our coldest and wettest winters, generally here in Montana. You have a really strong Pacific jet, you have that cold air dropping down into Canada, so on and so forth. Here's kind of a nice little comparison. It's overly simplified, though. You'll see these graphics all the time. People are like, oh, okay, well, if we have an El Nino, that means it's going to be, a little bit wetter in the Pacific Northwest, more mild into Montana, and then most of the moisture is going to stay to our south. That's not always the case, right? There's a million different factors that play into it. And the one that I'm really keeping my eye on, we talked about it this summer and it actually panned out pretty well for us, is this quasi-biennial oscillation. All this is upper level winds along the equator, about where the stratosphere is, okay? This summer, we were positive. Now we're into a negative phase. Positive phase is westerly winds. We like that in the summertime because it helps draw that moisture in off the coast. However, going into the wintertime, we like it to be negative because what it does, they're easterly winds, and it causes your, let me see, I think I got it on this graphic here. Okay, so this isn't the exact graphic, somewhere on here. Basically, what an easterly wind does for you is it causes your polar vortex to be a little bit weaker. And I'm trying to find, I thought I had a better little graphic in here of the polar vortex. There we go. Okay, so this kind of breaks it down a little bit. And I really recommend checking out this website. It's severe-weather.eu. They have one of the best descriptions of this whole quasi-biennial oscillation thing. The take-home message here, there's a lot of factors that go into weather, but I think that this one is going to be a big one going into winter. So we're in a negative phase. In other words, easterly winds, right? What easterly winds tend to do is they cause that polar vortex, I'll spit it out here, to not be as strong. It's going to break down a little bit. What that does is it allows for colder air to drop down over Montana, okay? We're not going to get the extreme cold like what we would with a westerly phase. In other words, a positive QBO. Positive QBO is going to strengthen the polar vortex. It's going to remain stronger. It's going to remain further north. And when that happens, if it does drop south, it is insanely cold and it stays insanely cold for a period of time. Whereas if that polar vortex is a little bit weaker, we get kind of these waves like warm, cold, warm, cold, warm, cold, kind of more fluctuating, okay? So then to backtrack a little bit, if you take that colder air and we hang on to this little bit of monsoonal flow, right? I'm kind of anticipating that our winter is going to be a little bit more on the mild side. It's going to be kind of more of the trendy, the warm, cold thing. But I think we're going to be okay in terms of precipitation. Right on track with average, maybe a little bit above. I'm going to just start at the top here and just kind of run through this real quick. Some of these graphics, I know I'm going a little bit crazy with them because there's just a few of them that I wanted to point out. But really, again, that take-home message is going to be the QBO this year. Again, that quasi-biennial oscillation and the fact that it's trended over to that negative phase. I think that is going to open up the door for a little bit more mild weather for our winter, but yet still trend over to a little bit of, I thought I had another graphic in here, but I can't find the darn thing. Trend over to a little bit more precipitation in our area. So does that make any sense, Lane? I don't know if that made any sense, or I rambled on too long about that and lost everybody. But I think the take-home message here is, again, we're going to have El Nino, no doubt about that. The QBO is going to be in a negative phase, which is easterly winds that historically weakens the polar vortex, which you would think is potentially a good thing, which it is for us because, again, we're not going to be as cold as we potentially could be if that whole chunk of cold air drops down. But it does open up the door for some of those pockets of colder air to mix in with a little bit of moisture coming in off of the South Pacific if that stays in place. So, yeah, I don't know if that made a lot of sense or if I squirreled out a little bit too much on you.
No, I think, and especially for our livestock producers that are obviously, we had pretty good hay crop this year for so many producers, and after $250 hay the last few years of drought, they'll still be feeding hay. There's no doubt about that, but they might have some a little bit of an open winter for some weeks, it looks like. But definitely there could be some severe weather that still comes with this as well, where you're going to be having to put some hay to those cows.
Right.
That's kind of the assumption I've read with a lot of the reading I've done on it, that you're going to have some nice open periods, but also some severe weather along with that,
right?
With this type of El Nino pattern.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that it's going to be crazy extreme. Again, if that polar vortex, in other words, just that basically chunk of cold air up north, is not as tightly knit and strong, the good news behind that is, again, it's not as extreme. So if it does drop south, you're not going to get the extreme cold. Whereas, if that thing continues to strengthen and then it moves south, like we had it happen last year, it gets dang cold when that happens. So I think for the livestock guys, yes, you're going to have some snaps of cold. Yes, you're going to have some snaps of moisture. But I think for the most part, it's going to be a pretty average year. I don't anticipating it being, above average in any category or certainly below average. You'll love it. Like any other weather guy, it's 50-50. But again, I think that's going to be the big message this year is it's not going to be a typical stereotypical El Nino just because of that other factor that we're kind of keeping an eye on. And really the big thing is just keep an eye on sea surface temperatures. If we continue to see warming sea surface temperatures down off of the South Pacific, that's all going to change. But if we hang on to that colder water off of the California coast, that will help to feed a little bit of moisture into our region. In other words, we'll get a little bit of a dip there and it'll kind of suck it north a little bit further. But if we lose that, then it could potentially dry up for us and stay a little bit more mild. So whenever you're looking at long range stuff, really look at the sea surface temperatures, look at El Nino, La Nina, upper level winds, the QBO. Those are all things to kind of take into consideration.
Well, Jason, thanks for, dusting off your meteorology cap there for a little bit. I know you talk weather every day on KMON, but the long term, I know you're a little concerned about that, but I think you did a good job.
Thank you. Yeah, it's. I mean, as soon as you put your finger on something, that's when it changes. And for the most part, we hit this summer on the head pretty well. As I mentioned, the area I went wrong is I thought we were going to get hotter quicker. We just hung on to that cold water forever, even though we transitioned over to El Nino, which generally leads to the hotter summer. The PDO off of the North Pacific, we just hung on to it, right? Which, again, nobody's complaining about because we needed the moisture, we needed the cooler weather. But that's what kept us cooler. So those are all factors that you got to look at. And again, they're always changing. But this winter really, again, just if I had to put my finger on it, I think it's going to fluctuate quite a bit this winter, the warm, the cold, the warm, the cold. And I think we're going to be pretty on track with normal, maybe a little bit below on precipitation, maybe just a little bit above in terms of temperatures. But I think it's going to be a pretty stereotypical winter this year in Montana.
Well, again, Jason Laird has been our co-host here this morning on our Fencelines and Headlines, a morning host there at the KMON 560 radio station. And Jason, you've been on air there for a few months now.
Yeah,
I guess you play a lot of good country music in the mornings, which is really good. Sorry, I have a hair on my microphone that's been.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, no, that's one of the
hair.
things. I know there's lab hair and you know what hair. There's everything in here too. I totally get it. But no, and that's one of the things we brought back on the morning show. You know, the last couple of years, music was eliminated from the morning show, and not that we play a lot. You know, we still obviously have all the Western Ag reports in there, the Rodeo Road Show, sports, everything like that. But we thought, you know, we wanted to sprinkle a little bit of music back in there. And I guess, Lane, the best way I could describe what I want the morning show to feel like is I want it to feel like you're sitting at that local hole-in-the-wall cafe in the middle of nowhere, just shooting the bull with, you know, a bunch of other farmers and ranchers. That's the feel I want out of the morning show. You know, we'll bring some folks in and chat with them on occasion. We'll play a couple of songs here and there, but just a little bit looser, but yet very informative radio show. That's kind of what we're going for, if that makes any sense at all.
And how annoying is it when you have listeners text you with the correct answers to trivia and things like that, maybe just at a stoplight safely texting the morning host of a radio show?
Oh, it's totally fine. I'm more than used to it, to be honest with you. You know, it's like over the years, I have enough friends that listen to the program. Thankfully, you know, friends listen to the program. So you're not the only one, Lane. We'll put it that way. I have other people bugging me all morning long. If I'm really busy, I put my phone somewhere where I can't see it. We'll put it that way. So,
well, good thing I have useless country music knowledge as well. So,
oh, well, if you've listened to Bob and I, we're no better. I mean, golly, we go down the rabbit hole of Studio B in Nashville and, you know, various country singers and everything. So yeah, that's the problem I got to rein in Bob. You know, gosh, oh my God. He knows more country music history than I think I could ever dream of knowing. So between him, me, and then your feedback, you know, we pretty much got the whole gamut covered.
Well, I one day I know Jeff Womack is going to be tuning in when you're not ready for it. And
I know. He's supposed to be in Montana here this weekend, believe it or not. Yeah, I'm totally spilling the beans on that, so his stalkers can go find him down in Bozeman.
Yeah, well, I would pass him up to get his mom's autograph any day.
That's true. Yeah. You gotta meet Donna. Donna's an icon in the broadcasting industry. So
Donna Kelly, yeah.
Yep, Donna Kelly. Gosh, you realize she was like one of the first anchors on CNN, like the very first ones. Her and Jeff's dad, actually. So yeah, crazy world.
And if anyone ever needs a tour of Nashville or the RFD-TV studios, just call up Jeff Womack. He will take you around in a golf cart or
you bet,
or a gator. I don't know, what do you take you around in? Tell you the truth, but,
probably all of the above. I'm still trying to digest all of the useless knowledge I learned last time I was down there and got the penny tour of Nashville. Because I mean, I'm not joking about this. If a country music artist peed on the side of the street somewhere, he knows about it and will take you there. And that's a true story. Brett Eldridge, I think it was, peed on the side of a building, and there is a sign there that says it. And he'll take you there and show you. I mean, the useless knowledge you never thought you'd ever need until you go to Nashville.
Minnie Pearl did shots of tequila right here.
Literally. This song was written in this building on this day. It's like too much.
Well, again, Jason, thanks for joining us here today. And again, for our viewers and listeners, join us here on Fencelines and Headlines. You can hear Jason every morning, weekday on 560 KMON. Your show 6 to 9 a.m. Is that when the show
6
runs?
to 9 is we're live. Yep. I'm there a little bit longer than that, just, you know, updating news and weather and things like that. But yes, we're on air live 6 to 9 for the morning show.
Well, again, a big thank you to Jason for joining us here today, and for all of you for joining us here today. We went through a lot, but just a few of the headlines that we share on the Western Ag Network throughout the week. So if you haven't done so, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like us, follow us on our Facebook pages, and also subscribe to the Lanecast Ag Podcast if you're listening to today's Fencelines and Headlines. So I guess with that, Jason, thanks again for joining us.
I appreciate you having me. Hopefully we can do it again soon sometime.
All right. Well, thanks, Bud. And again, thank you all for joining us. I'm Nordlund for the Western Ag Network. We'll catch you next time.